Very few things have the ability to incapacitate someone's life as much as fear. And yet most of those things that we fear in life are not real, but simply imaginary. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, who came to fame through his books Sherlock Holmes, was known as a practical joker, and one time to his friends around London he sent a telegram saying, "Flee at once, all has been found out." And dozens of his friends left the city, not even knowing why. But fear had struck at their hearts. I used to run a drug treatment program. And in this program, we would get kids that liked to brag about how tough they were, how nothing scared them. And one of those was a young man from one of the street gangs in one of the major cities in Ohio. He liked to try and scare the other kids and would go out of his way to just try and terrorize people any way that he could, but never himself wanting to admit that he had fears. He took some scrap paper and cardboard and aluminum foil and fashioned himself a homemade Ouija board and would have fun trying to scare the other kids by convincing them that he had been in touch with the dark side and that he had evil spirits that were on his side. One night I happened to be in the building on some other business and it was late at night. So I decided that it would be good for me to walk through the building and do a room check. And when I walked past John's room, I noticed he was not in his bed. I asked his roommate about it, and his roommate informed me that John had just for a moment stepped across the hallway to use the restroom. And so plotting real quick with his roommate, I slid up under John's bed and waited for John to return. When John came in, his roommate started to ask those leading type questions, whispering because it was after lights out. And he said, John, did you use your Ouija board tonight? John was quick to tell him, oh, yes, I did. And he said, John, were you able to contact those evil spirits that you like to talk about? John says, oh, yes, I did. And the young man in the other bed said to him, he says, John, what were the results of that? And before John could answer, I just couldn't resist. I put my hands up under his bed and put my knees up under the bottom part, and I shoved as hard as I could. John went flying clear up off of his bed, and when he landed down on it, I took my arms and reached up around and grabbed him by the shoulders, and in my most sinister voice that I could come up with, I said, John, I'm going to drag you to hell. And that tough gang member wet his bed. All of us have fears, and often fears of things that are not real, just imaginary. I love the story out of the coaching career of Newt Rockne. When he was going up against a team that everyone had predicted he did not stand a chance. They were going up against USC, and that year the Trojans had just had an unbeatable record. They had easily defeated everyone that they had taken the field against. But up till now, they hadn't gone against Newt Rockne. He had one advantage and only one advantage in the game, and that is that the game was being played there at his home field. And so, in the days before the game, he went out and started going through the neighborhoods and started recruiting some people to come, not to play the game, but just to help him on game day. He was able to come up with a little over 100 guys, each of them over 6 foot tall, each of them over 300 pounds. And the day of the game, even though they weren't eligible to play, he dressed them in Notre Dame uniforms. When it came time for the team to be announced and to go onto the field, before the real team went out, he sent charging out through the tunnel these 100 huge guys in shoulder pads and helmets. They looked even larger than life. As they went running out through the tunnel, the Trojans saw them coming. And those players for USC, their eyes got as big as could be. Panic and fear started to set into their hearts. Their coaches quickly realized the ruse that was taking place. They went out and told these guys, that's not the real team. That's not who you're going to play against. But it was too late. The fear had already set in. Their players were already demoralized. The coaches tried to pump them back up. They said, it'll be the same as every other game. There'll be 11 of them and 11 of us, and you guys have proven yourselves to be the champions. From the beginning of that game, that first kickoff, it was all Notre Dame. Because USC could not get out of their mind those giants that they thought were going to take the field against them, even though not one of those giants were ever in the game. How many times in your life have you been stopped from trying to achieve something that you've really wanted to go for? How many times have you taken your dreams and your plans and your goals and set them aside on the shelf because of some insurmountable giant that you imagine stands before you? Fear, more than anything else, will incapacitate us. Fear will rob us of our dreams. It will rob us of our well-being. It will rob us of our peace of mind. It will rob us of our health. And yet, if we look past those fake giants, if we look past those insurmountable odds that most times really don't exist, we find that when we face those fears vanish in the presence of faith. And the obstacles are removed that have stopped us from moving on to greatness.